Okay, so good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to the second day, and I really hope you all enjoyed the delights that Geneva has to offer, albeit a little bit too warm for some of us. I think I'm a little bit smaller today because I melted a little bit yesterday. But today you'll all notice the room is that little bit fuller because today we're joined by our colleagues from the geospatial community, and today is a joint session with UN GGIM Europe, and I think it's great that we're coming together to kind of have that conversation between the statistical world and the geospatial world, because I think we all know how important that integration it really is. Maybe before I start, and for those who are new to the room, and many of you do not know me, my name is Padraig Dalton. Padraig is the Irish word or the Gaelic word for Patrick, so if you prefer Patrick, that's fine by me. And I'm the Director General of the Central Statistics Office in Ireland. Have been now for over 10 years, and I've worked all my life in official statistics, 31 years. And I also have the honor of chairing the Conference of European Statisticians. So today we have this is the second time we're having a joint session with UN GGIM. And I think if it's half as successful as the first time, I think we're going to have a really, really good day. So I'm really looking forward to it. And we really have a really good agenda to work through for the day. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. Just maybe before I hand over and to share the podium with Tomasz, I want to just kind of say yesterday we had a really good day. I think this is a safe space for us all. I think this is the one time we get to come together each year. And really what's important is about sharing experiences and sharing your thoughts and what you have found. So I want to encourage, we had lots of conversation yesterday. So I want to encourage everybody to engage. Don't be afraid to put up that flag. Share what's on your mind. It's a safe space. I've learned that over very many years. It's like a family. But we like all families, we'll argue from time to time, but there's nothing wrong with that. So I'd encourage everybody to kind of engage, share your thoughts, any views that you have at all, because these are a lot of really interesting things. We're pushing new boundaries here, so I don't think there's any right or any wrong. So I think what's really important is that we put it all out on the table and we have a conversation about it. And I think that's what the agenda is set up to do. And I'm really confident that that's what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm now going to invite Tomasz Petek. Tomasz is the Director General of the Surveying and Mapping Authority of the Republic of Slovenia. And Tomasz is also Chair of UN GGIM Europe. Tomasz is going to chair the morning part of the session, and I'm going to chair the afternoon. So real 50-50 split, Tomasz. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tomasz. You have the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege and also the honor to give you some opening remarks on behalf of European Regional Committee of Group of Experts for Global Geospatial Information Management, or shorter UN GGIM Europe. I would like to greet you all at this joint day of Conference of European Statisticians and plenary meeting of UN GGIM Europe. As I was introduced, at the moment I'm chairing, I'm acting as a chair of UN GGIM Europe Executive Committee. Everything is happened somewhere, and the knowledge of where is a topic which UN GGIM is dealing with. 12 years ago, Economic and Social Council of United Nations established the Committee of Experts for Global Geospatial Information Management, or UNGGIM, as the intergovernmental mechanism for making joint decisions and setting directions with regard to the production, availability, and use of geospatial information within national, regional, and global policy frameworks. UNGGIM aimed to address those global challenges regarding the use of geospatial information, including the development agendas, and to serve as a body for global policy making in the field of geospatial information management. In geographical Europe, we recognized this 10 years ago, and at that time was established Regional Committee for Geographical Europe, or UNGGIM Europe, as one of 5 regional committees. Our mission was to maximize the use of geospatial information within the Europe for a safer and more sustainable world. This mission we realized through work program and lines of work, what will be presented just a few minutes later within the program. So our priority areas of work is related with integrated geospatial information framework, geodetic reference frame, data integration, sustainable development goals, and data strategy and policy. We believe that only together we could address all those challenges, and we all agree that the need for geospatially enabled statistics for data-driven, evidence-based decision-making is higher than ever before. So it has been understood that an improved understanding of social, economic, and environmental issues which are in front of us can be achieved by analyzing integrated statistical and geospatial information. Today is time to speak about strategic directions in geospatial and in statistical communities, and exchange some knowledge and information between each other and find even new synergies for our common work under a motto, leave no one behind. So I'm sure that we will have a successful day and fruitful debate during today's joint event. So if we start now to speak about the strategic directions in official statistics and in geospatial community, I would like to give the floor to Pedrek, who will present the strategic directions from the statistical community. Please.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. And as Thomas just said, I just want to briefly outline the strategic directions of the work of the Conference of European Statisticians. So I won't have slides, so don't worry looking up there. I think we all know that the world of official statistics is changing rapidly and it's evolving very, very quickly. And the demands for data and the demands for services are growing pretty much exponentially, actually. And some of that has been driven, I think we've seen that over many years, but I think the last couple of years has accelerated a lot of that. We've had COVID-19 pandemic where the statistical world and the geospatial world, we've had to flex very quickly. We've had to be agile. We've had to move to meet the demands, and we've had to move to stay relevant, because if we didn't step up, there are others out there who would have. Thankfully, the statistical world certainly stepped up, and I think that was important. We've had the 2020 round of population censuses, which is also, census taking is changing, and I think we all see that, and we're going to discuss that a little bit later on. I think there are also challenges for us in the area of, the underlying legislative framework that we all operate under, and I think having an appropriate legislative framework to reflect the modern world, because sometimes I think our legislation, certainly in Ireland, the legislation goes back to 1993, but we have to continually look at our legislation and ensure that it's fit for purpose and fit for the environment that we're trying to measure and change. And we actually see that even at a European level now, where we're actually discussing the framework legislation underpinning official statistics at a European level. We obviously have organizational structures are changing, and they're going to change because of things like blended working and hybrid working, and we're going to discuss that this afternoon. And we obviously have the whole challenge of modernization and standardization of tools and methods. And this is all about making sure we have the systematic implementation of common standards across the globe so that the data is comparable, because that's what evidence makers want. That's what our users want. They want to be able to look, compare, contrast, and see how things are evolving, not just in our own countries, but across the globe. The globe is a small place. The world is now a small place. So the comparators are no longer just our neighbors. It's a much broader set of countries that our policymakers want to look at. And of course, we have the whole challenge of new data sources. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking new data sources are always the innovative data sources like mobile network data and traffic loop data, but also administrative data is continually evolving and changing. And so we need to maintain the focus on administrative data as well, and ensuring we're using that and accessing that in appropriate ways. So I think when we look at the strategic directions, there are two broad categories. We have what we call cross-cutting challenges, and we have statistical subject matter domains. And I think we're just going to have a quick look at both. So first of all, on the cross-cutting, I think one of the first things we need to be thinking about is the core principles, core values and increasingly data ethics. And I think this is a big challenge for all of us. You know, GDPR has really impacted on all of us, and this move towards data privacy commissioners, and the need to collaborate and to work in tandem with that particular sector is really, really important, because it engenders trust. We have to retain trust, we have to retain relevance, and we have to make sure that we do everything in an ethical manner. And that's not straightforward, actually, sometimes, and I think we have a lot of work to do that. Yesterday, we celebrated the 30 years of the fundamental principles of official statistics, which I think was really important. And at the same time, we took a step forward with the agreement by the conference yesterday on core values for official statistics. And this is about us recognizing the need to evolve and to change, and reflecting that change in the landscape in which we work, from a data privacy perspective, from a data ethics perspective. And I think that's really, really important. I think the CES recognizes that more guidance is needed for both producers and users. And I think that's really, really important. And so that work that we were initiating, I think, is going to play a key part as we move forward. I think one of the words we've talked about, sorry, forgive me if I'm speaking too fast, so just put your hand up and say, Padraig, slow down. Lydia, I see two hands. Lydia always puts her hand up. Okay, Take has put his hand up because Lydia put his hand up. But we often talk about this phrase, social license. And actually, it was actually just in a conversation last week with Anil, he kind of pointed out that social license is a word that not everybody understands. But social acceptability, that's a much easier word to understand. Social acceptability for the ways in which, not just what we do, but how we do it. And that's really all about the data linkage, data integration, accessing new data sources, making sure that we do everything in an ethical manner. So that's a cross-cutting piece of work that we need to focus on, and that we are focused on in the CES. Innovation and modernization is the key. You know, it's a kind of evolve or die. You know, I think it's this idea that we live in a world that's constantly evolving, and therefore that world that we're trying to measure means that we need to evolve with it. So we can't stay, well, we can stay static if we want, but if we stay static, we will no longer be relevant. And that's not where any one of us need to be, because the world of official statistics and the world of geospatial data, we need to be relevant, because we are the counterfactual to things like the post-truth, alternative facts, fake news. So we have a real responsibility to step up and to continue to modernize and to evolve. And we, of course, we're modernizing across a whole range of areas. And thankfully, within the CES framework, we heard yesterday the work of the high-level group on the modernization of official statistics. And we just saw the huge scope of work that's being done within that framework. And that's really, really important for our community. And it cuts across so many areas. I'm not going to mention them all, but like things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, input privacy techniques, data science, data governance. And the CES sees this as really, really important. New data sources, I've spoken about it a couple of times, and I really think that's important. And of course, new data sources, you know, the days are gone when we had one data source and we produced an output from that data source. That world is over maybe 10 years ago, only we didn't realize it. It's all now about multiple data sources, data integration and data linkage and integration, and multiple outputs in different formats for different users. So it's a far more complex world that we live in. And I think we have to reflect on that. And of course, getting access to, most of us have access to administrative data, and we need to retain that access to administrative data. We should never neglect the absolute critical importance of the administrative data. And what's really interesting is, one of the criticisms of administrative data over the years was that it wasn't timely. Whereas now, certainly I can see nationally, we're beginning to see the emergence of real-time administrative data sources that are really good quality, that provide really good quality data. And I think that's a real opportunity for the statistical community, and we have to focus on that. But we also have to focus on the other new data sources, the privately held data sources. And that's a bigger challenge, as we all know, because we don't have a legal right of access to those data sources yet. But if we're to answer the questions that policymakers are asking us to answer, we're going to need to gain access to all of those private data sources. Otherwise, we will not meet the demands of our broad range of users. And I think we're very, very focused on that. But of course, data linkage and integration is not just about data linkage and integration of statistical data sources. And it's what we're here to discuss this morning. And it's the integration of data, statistical data sources with geospatial sources. And I think that's a new direction of travel for a lot of us in the world of official statistics. Increasingly, we need to be visualizing our data. It's no longer just about tables of data and about research microdata files. It's about providing data in a way that the policymaker can engage with very quickly. They can get the message very quickly, that the citizen has the right to access information and to understand information. And I think that integration of statistical data and geospatial data has a really important role to play in that regard. And we need to focus on that. And we are focused on that in the CES. And that's why we're here today for a second time, having a joint session with UNGGIM. I said earlier on about legislation and how that's really, really important. And modernizing legislation is really important. And again, within the CES, we have a steering group on modernizing statistical legislation. And I think that's really, really going to help us. It's going to provide a really useful reference guide for those of us who have to change legislation nationally. But even conversations we've had in preparation for this week, again, I was talking to Juan Manuel last week from Spain. I don't know where you are, Juan. You're here somewhere in the room. I see you. We had a good conversation last week, and we were talking about the relevance of the discussion in the CES to what we're trying to do at a European level now. And so it just kind of sees how it all ties together and how legislation is so important for us all and how it needs to be modernized. We're all aware of sustainable development goals, and 2030 is coming around very quickly. I can remember when we had the Millennium Development Goals. I'm looking at Gabriella there, who was directly involved in that many years ago and still heavily involved in the SDGs. But 2030 is coming quickly, and the demands, I think the pressure as we get closer to 2030, I think we will see policymakers and users alike beginning to kind of realize, oh God, we're getting closer and closer to 2030. We need more and more data. We need more and more evidence. And some of that evidence can only be gotten by accessing all available data sources, by integrating multiple data sources. And of course, the geospatial is a key part, because the geospatial is a key part of the SDGs. And I think that's really, really important. And of course, the roadmap to SDG statistics developed by the CES is, I think, going to play a critical part in trying to move us forward. And I think that coordination role, that kind of data stewardship role of national statistical institutes, that's going to just grow in importance. And I think the SDG is one of the things that's going to bring that into sharp focus. Communications and capacity development. I think, again, this is, we need to develop, we need to invest in our organizations, but we also need to invest in communications. I was giving a presentation last week where I described the CSO as an organization 15 or 20 years ago, where we used to throw the statistics over the fence and run back underneath our stones. And how we have had to change, because the world has changed. We no longer are compilers of data and statistics. We're compilers of knowledge and insight. We are providers of data services. And we are expected to play a leadership role, and we are expected to work in tandem with policymakers. And I think that's really, really important. And I suppose that kind of, in a sense, encapsulates the data stewardship role. And of course, we need to share our experiences, because we all have similar experiences. Then, the more we talk, the more we realize we all have the same challenges. But sometimes we address the challenges in different ways because of our institutional settings, because of the cultures and the environments we all work in. And so sometimes one size doesn't fit all. But what I have learned over my 31 years in official statistics is that you will always learn from listening to your colleagues. And I think we have to put a framework in place. We have to put platforms in place that are going to allow us to exchange experiences and how we manage some of our challenges. So if I move on to the statistical subject matter domains, and I think these are obvious to everyone, but if we start simply with the environment and climate change, and we've probably all felt it very much, and Europe is feeling it very much with the heat wave at the moment, and we see what's happening right across the world. And I think this is one of the fastest growing areas in official statistics. And it's also a very challenging area because there's a huge level of coordination required even within our own countries, because there are so many different data players involved in this whole broader piece of climate change, of environment and energy. But I think the CES, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to develop tools to support coherent and comparable statistics on climate change. We're looking at the development of the circular economy and guidelines around that. And of course, measuring the impact of hazardous events and disasters, because that's what we're seeing from climate change. So this is really an important area for us to focus on. The economy. My God, the economy is so complex. It was always complex, but I remember when I was a young student, and it was very simple, that C plus I plus G plus X minus M, and my God, that was GDP. And now we have things like G and I star and modified total domestic demand to try and net out the impact of globalization, so that we can give our policymakers an insight in into our domestic economies, where you kind of try and net out the impact of globalization. So globalization is a reality. It's hitting us all to different extents, of course, but it is a really important factor, and it's not that easy to measure. It's complicated because the enterprises that we're dealing with, they don't respect national domains. It's global now. The economy is global. It's no longer national accounts is kind of almost a misnomer, because it's kind of international accounts. They don't respect borders, and yet we still have to compile national accounts, and that's a big challenge. Digitalization, of course, is another big challenge for us, and the way enterprises and the way companies work is totally different to even how they worked 5-7 years ago. So things are evolving very quickly. We have to evolve quickly. Well-being is key, and of course this goes back to the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi mindset of, you know, where beyond GDP. And this is really, we haven't really grasped that yet. And I think it's an area that we're going to have to focus on, and we will be asked to focus on. And the informal economy. So the CES is going to support its members through the provision of guidance and by organizing expert forums and capacity development activities. And of course, we have the new SNA, System of National Accounts. The System of National Accounts is currently under review. And that's also going to have a big impact on what we do. So the economic area is challenging. And that's even before we talk about social and population. And I think we just come through the 2020 round, and we're already talking about 2030. And it's going to come quickly, as I said, around with the SDGs. And my sense of it is that census taking has changed forever. I know in Ireland, we're still doing a kind of a traditional census, but the traditional census days, we've just done a census on April 3rd this year. Traditional census, I think its days are numbered, if not already done. And I think that's so what we're going to see is in 2030, I think, is a much greater focus on administrative data. And administrative data is going to have to play a far more central role in population taking into the future, I think, for very many of us. Many of you in the room are already there, and some of us are very envious of that. But that's great, because we can learn from your experiences, and we can leverage from what you've done. There's also moves towards online data collection, and that's key, but not just in census areas. Anything to do with social statistics online is now, like with COVID, we couldn't call to houses. We had to move online. And so we have to build on that innovation and retain it. Annual population estimates. I mean, the demand from users, they're not going to wait 5 and 10 years for population type data anymore. And at a European level, it looks like we're going to have legislation that's going to say you have to have population type data on an annual basis from 2026 or 2027. And that means we're going to, that's ESOP. I see Gabriela. we'll see how it goes through council and commission if it gets there by then. But if it goes through, this is what we're going to be faced with. And administrative data is going to have to be the way we go. We spoke a little bit yesterday about migration statistics, and that's always a huge challenge for policymakers. And I think it's always been a challenge for all of us trying to measure migration. Inward migration, outward migration is really difficult to measure. And we have to start accessing a much broader range of sources than we have been traditionally. And I think across society, we have inclusiveness. We have to make sure that our work includes all subgroups of society. And I think that's really, really important. And again, we spoke yesterday about COVID-19 and the differential impacts on men and women. But those societal issues, kind of gender identity, sexual orientation, these are now issues that it's part of our society. And our job is to measure society, and our statistics need to reflect the lived reality of individuals, not just the lived reality of the economy, but the lived reality of individuals. And that's the challenge for us, is how we move forward. And we spoke yesterday about multi-dimensional poverty measurement and how we're going to reach hard to reach groups. So there's a whole range of areas. You could pick any statistical domain, and I could have spoken here for another 20 minutes about a much broader, where we go into agricultural statistics, balance of payments, right across the domain, the demands are growing. And I think in a sense, that's the challenge. The strategic challenge for us is to stay relevant and to evolve. So just lastly, maybe touching on the collaboration with UNGGIM, I think one of the great things about the CES is that we're very tangible. We undertake work, we deliver guidance. It's always, there's a tangible output. Some of our projects only last 12 months. It's either successful or we kill them. And I think what we are here today with UNGGIM, I think we're at the start of a really important road. And I think one of the key focuses for us is we need to have a conversation about how we move forward together. And then we need to turn it into a tangible, so we need to have the strategy, and then we need to turn that into a tangible set of actions, how we move together and how we implement, how we make the integration of statistical data and geospatial data a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. You addressed an impressive amount of strategic challenges which are in front of the statistical community, but I'm already now aware that these challenges will be handled in appropriate way because the strategy is on the paper, and also the willingness and readiness and also the knowledge exists for the handle with this amount of challenge. Allow me now to invite on floor David Henderson, the Chief of Geospatial Officer at Ordnance Survey, Great Britain. He will introduce us about strategic pillars within the UNGGIAM Europe strategy. So we work with sharing knowledge, raising awareness, and strategic leadership, which we identify as the most important part of our strategy. So please, the floor is yours, David.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Patrick, for such a great opening this morning. I suspect many of the comments that I might make in the opening presentation will be very, very familiar, given that Patrick has just done such a fantastic summary of some of the issues which are facing the statistical community, that it transcends so perfectly to the geospatial community also. One of the other things, Patrick, you did was to remind me to speak slowly. I'm also from a Gallic country in the north of Europe with a tendency to speak very quickly. So that was also a worthwhile reminder from the chair. Thank you. So thank you also to CES for committing to work collaboratively and continue to work collaboratively with UNGGIAM Europe region. It's very much appreciated. The presentation that I give you this morning is very much on behalf of the regional committee and the regional group that represents GGIM here in Europe. And we'd like to just share a few observations, very similarly to that of Patrick, to share a little bit about the work we have done. I think it's a great call to arms to be tangible in the work we've done, and it's something that as a global community, the UNGGIAM have committed to very much over the last few years. And then finally, I'd just like to share with you some insights into the revised regional strategy that we've put in place here. And the reason for doing that is really an invitation to work collaboratively with us as we go forward. I think we could probably spend the next day, perhaps, talking about the context of this slide. Patrick, you did a great job of covering so many different strands of the changes that we are all experiencing in the world today. And whilst COVID-19 perhaps is a useful reminder of how just important our respective data communities are, it is only one, and hopefully one that is maybe towards the rear view mirror, and in front there are many more, which serve to underpin the importance of ensuring that authoritative and trusted data, whether that's statistical, whether that's geospatial, is readily accessible and presented in a way that it can contribute to some of the world's biggest challenges that face us today. There have been some very stark reports recently. The IPCC latest report on climate change should serve as a real wake-up call for us all, not just to recognize that there is challenge ahead, but to really serve as a reminder of how important our community, this community, is in addressing some of those changes, not to see it as a problem over there, but to see it as a problem that we can directly influence and directly contribute towards. I think what this slide doesn't cover so much is also the significant technological, I try not to call it disruption, but the technological environment in which we now live. The world hasn't just changed in terms of the problems we're trying to face into, but also the tools and the technologies that we have available to us as data people to ensure that our data can have greater impact. It was really interesting to listen to Patrick talk about the importance of official statistics. Perhaps some of my geospatial colleagues will forgive me that it wasn't so long ago that the end product for us was the map. It was a range of maps at different scales, different resolutions of information. It was very clear that we were working towards the publication of a data set. Today, our geospatial data serves as infrastructure. It's the fundamental backbone to modern economies, to the developing world, and it serves alongside other data infrastructures such as official statistics in solving some of those problems. So the notion of not just integration, but collaborative working and recognizing that it's not just our respective environments, but those of the private sector, those of other domains that need to work together is absolutely fundamental. We have the tools available to us in it to enable that to happen. Next slide, please. So over the last 10 years and 12 years since the origination, if you like, of GGIM as a global initiative, the Committee of Experts have brought together national representatives from geospatial agencies, from mapping agencies, and indeed from statistical agencies to work together with academia, the private sector, and a broad range of NGOs to strengthen the frameworks that need to be present for global geospatial information management to have impact. The three sort of predominant frameworks that I would call out would be the framework for effective land administration, the global statistical geospatial framework, and the integrated geospatial information framework. Those tools, if you like, those fundamental frameworks bring together a decade of hard work and consolidation of many different aspects that make up the fundamental, if you like, for as to how our data can have impact. We've worked through aspects of governance. We've worked through aspects of what makes good data. We've defined the fundamental data that is essential for any developing and developed nation. We've demonstrated the applicability of these frameworks in action, both in developing but also developed economies. And I think now we are facing into the next 8 years through to 2030 with some really tangible tools that enable us to deliver an impact. However, these tools and frameworks cannot sit in isolation. They need to be developed. They need to be developed in collaboration. They need to be developed in partnership. And I think that the strength of forums like this is to encourage that greater degree of partnership and collaborative working so that we can place these frameworks into action and they can become common practice, not so much better practice or best practice, but common practice. And I think our efforts as a GGM community over the next 8 years will be to place these at the front and center of the work that we do and work really hard to implement these frameworks at the heart of national data infrastructures. Next slide, please. So within Europe, we realize we have a role to play alongside the other regional groups that make up GGIM. Within Europe, we are blessed with some very strong geospatial leadership skills. We are blessed with some very close working relationships with our respective statistical colleagues, both nationally and across the region. And we take some responsibility for our leadership within the global stage. We reflected last year at our plenary that our regional strategy needed to change. It needed to reflect where we are today and needed to provide us as a region with a framework in which we can develop our own commitments over the next few years. So we've translated the global priorities, the global challenges which have been laid out by GGIM and set them out in a very simple strategy framework for our work over the next few years, which is what I'd like to share with you today. I think there's a real emphasis for us that, of course, it's all about the data. I feel comfortable saying that in this forum, but it's not just about the data. And I think the frameworks, the collaborative working, the ways of working, the how to leverage value from that data is absolutely essential. I think, Padraig, your comment about relevance is really important, but I think we take ownership for that relevance. We do that through demonstrating value. We do that by working, really being restless in our need to make new relationships and ensure that our data is being used in support of policy, service delivery, and making better decisions. These are absolutely fundamental outcomes, and this is our responsibility to ensure that our data is used to support that. If our data is not used, it cannot be useful. And I think that is a really important mantra. Next slide, please. So we've set out a renewed vision and mission statement at the heart of GGIM Europe through identifying opportunities, understanding and solving common challenges across the Europe region, by collaborating with partners to enhance the use of geospatial data and its integration with statistics to inform and drive action. And through that, we are convinced, we are conscious, we are ambitious that this will maximize the use of our geospatial information, not just in Europe, but contribute globally to a safer and more sustainable world. Next slide, please. So the strategy itself is relatively simple. The strategy comprises 3 pillars, which we've translated subsequently into 5 programs of work, which I'll share with you on the next few slides. Absolutely, we must commit to provide the tools, not just our data, as I said, the frameworks, the opportunity to release value from our data through sharing knowledge. We bring everyone together. We forget that sometimes our communities are instrumental in convening. We have great convening power. It's wonderful to see such a large multilateral group today in this room. But I think we need to remain conscious about our ability to convene, to provide facts, to provide insight to our complex world through data. And I think by bringing everything and everyone together, that is really important. And finally, in our strategy is a recognition of our responsibilities to provide strategic alignment, to provide strategic leadership, and to showcase, not just talk about the added value that we can bring, but to showcase that also. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, I'll canter through the 5 objectives. We have the next slide. So the 5 areas of work plan on the next few slides, we'll just, actually, if we just go to the next slide, I'm conscious of time. So the first one is to make sure that we are active in the further development of the integrated geospatial framework, to really continue to contribute to develop that framework, to show it in action, the value of the framework working in action in both developed and developing economies, and to really start to understand the issues in implementation and to work to resolve those and to evolve the framework as we go. Within Europe, we're very committed to that. We'll continue to work with the integrated framework and use that to also strengthen aspects of the global geospatial statistical framework and FELA for land administration also. Next slide. We're committed here in Europe to take leadership, particularly from our colleagues in Germany, to develop a geodetic reference frame and to lead the development of global geodesy at a global level. And see that as one of the technical strands that on a global level we can provide leadership to here in Europe. Next. And data integration, which I think integration may be one of these words, project, that we hear a lot about. I think absolutely, I do not need to repeat all of the things that Podrick said earlier on about the need for us to think about ensuring our frameworks act as the vehicle through which data can come together. It's not enough just to see an outcome of integration of geospatial and statistics, but to see our overall framework as the opportunity to collate, to bring together and to release value from the phenomenal amount of data that is now describing our planet, be it through environmental, social or economic data. So data integration for me is absolutely fundamental to achieving our outcomes and something which I'm sure we will talk more about today. Next slide. Sustainable development goals remain something which drives us towards outcome. I think, in terms of being tangible, there is much work still to be done amongst our communities for common reporting, for common monitoring, and for seeing opportunities to indeed contribute towards better outcomes by 2030. We have much more to do in this area. And finally, just the last slide, is to ensure that our data strategy and policy is better aligned. We know that on a global basis, there are few nations who are not revising and developing their national data policies, their national digital policies. Indeed, this is being done on regional levels also. And it's essential that we see our data, our capabilities as underpinning those strategic refresh. Thank you. Just the last slide. We've talked as part through our as implementing the strategy with our national statistics institutes and national mapping and geospatial agencies, and try to solicit greater participation. One of the key strands to our work over the next few years will be to maximize the opportunity for regional institutes here in Europe and across the wider community to engage with our work, to draw them in and actively participate. And I think we have taken great confidence in not just the interest, but the active desire to work together from both statistical in green and blue from the national mapping and geospatial community, cadastral agencies, to work very closely on some of these work plan areas. So hopefully when we leave today, we've brought some new people together and greater commitment. I know all of our work stream leads would welcome greater participation in their programs of work. Next slide. So really, what next? If you're not already connected nationally between your national statistics and national geospatial mapping cadastral agencies, I think there is always an important call through days like this. Hopefully, as we've said already, you're sat next to some of the most important colleagues within your national context. Please make sure you're taking the opportunity to do that. On behalf of UNGGIM Europe, we are very grateful to be stood here and sat here with you today in amongst the community together. We can be so much greater than the sum of our parts. And I think the opportunities for us to contribute to a better world are self-evident in so many ways. I just leave you with perhaps a quote, which I'll just read out. It's from John Muir, who's a Scottish environmentalist, a philosopher, and an advocate for the preservation of wilderness in the United States. And John Muir said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. I think for me, that speaks to the complexity of the world we're in today. And I think our opportunity is to remove some of that complexity through our data to help join complex problems together and find a way through together. So thank you again for the opportunity to present this morning. Thank you, Padraig, for starting so well. And we look forward to a fruitful day of discussion thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for a comprehensive presentation, also for the invitation for involvement of all part of our community in our future cooperation and collaboration. So now I could open the floor for discussion. Please, ladies and gentlemen, there is opportunity to express your opinion or give some remarks what was presented in both strategic documents. I was told that there was some statement for Germany. No. Belgium.
Hi. Now it will work. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name is Paul Becker, and I'm the president of the Federal Agency for Cartography and Geodesy in Germany. So I'm not a statistic guy, but I'm very happy to be here. And we have a very good relationship with the Federal Statistics Office in Germany. And we decided to formulate a short common statement regarding our cooperation. You can read it in the document. But I want to say a few words. The acknowledgement of BKG as other national authority owner in June 2020 is a very important issue. In our opinion, the owner status supports the European and national data integration actions and includes the geospatial agency better into the European statistical system. And we believe that the integration of geospatial and statistical data is essential to find innovative solutions for the future challenges in understanding and monitoring the changes on Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Germany. For United States was next.
We'd like to start off by first commending the European Regional Committee of UNGGIM for its development of a revised strategy to help guide collective efforts within the context of geospatial information access and management. The United States appreciates the active involvement of the European Regional Committee to promote the integrated geospatial information framework and to implement the associated IGIF plan of work. We would also like to specifically acknowledge the United Kingdom's leadership of the Associated Communications Working Group, Sweden's leadership of the Enhancing Capacity Building Working Group, and Belgium's leadership of the Mobilized Sustainable Funding Working Group. We recognize the importance of geospatial information in providing key insights about society and informing evidence-based policy decisions. The United States looks forward to continuing collaborative efforts with our international colleagues to prepare the report of the Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management that will be presented at the Economic and Social Council in July this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. Belgium, floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to underline the importance of the statement made by Germany, where the recognition of the German mapping agency as an ONA was approved. And we regret that in many other countries, the statistical colleagues did not support this designation of the mapping agency as an ONA. And I would really like all these countries to reconsider, because we think it's an important way to show the complementarity of the work that we do. And we cannot do a good job without you, and we believe you cannot do a good job without us. And I think it's important that this is also in this way represented. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. Thank you. And Belarus, please.
Беларусь высоко оценивает работу достижения UNGGIM Europe в части укрепления институциональных механизмов по управлению геопространственной информацией и поддерживает предлагаемую стратегию деятельности. Благодаря участию в мероприятиях, организуемых этой группой, мы узнали о возможностях использования ГИС-технологий в статистике, смогли имплементировать их в расчет показателей целей устойчивого развития. Так, сегодня разработана и размещена на сайте методика расчета по 9 показателям. И путем интеграции статистической и геопространственной информации мы рассчитали эти показатели. И что хочется в этом контексте отметить, что по отдельным показателям это была единственная возможность получения данных. По некоторым показателям были уточнены расчеты, обеспечено более высокое качество данных. Ну и что касается Беларуси, то работая в контексте цели устойчивого развития, мы наладили тесное взаимодействие с кадастровым агентством. И сегодня нам это помогло, и мы смогли привязать статистический регистр к координатам. И сегодня статистический регистр организации, сегодня есть возможность визуализации и анализа статистической информации по мелким территориям. Что касается переписи населения 2019 года, также использовались ГИС-технологии, и сегодня, имея привязку, к геоинформации мы тоже можем агрегировать информацию на любом территориальном уровне. В принципе, использование GIS-технологий – это вообще как бы новые возможности в статистике, и мы благодарим работу этой группы и готовы тоже как бы участвовать в дальнейшем. Спасибо.
Thank you, representative of Belarus. So I would like to invite Colombia.
Thank you very much. And we are very pleased about such enlightening presentations from the CES and the UNGGIM Europe. And we would like to highlight the leading role of UNGGIM Europe in its role in showcasing good practices in the use of location-related reference data and the integration of data sources together with the development of contributions to monitor the SDGs, as well as in the leading role they are playing in the important discussions of global core geospatial data subjects. In particular, Colombia highlights also the work of the CES in innovation processes and considers them a strategic priority to identify new opportunities to innovate and modernize the work of official statistics, and we express our interest in participating in this initiative. We would like to highlight the importance of enhancing cross-regional collaboration between UNGGIM Europe and Americas, since there are specific challenges facing both regions that will only increase the relevance, such as climate change, disaster management and prevention, and describing socioeconomic trends in our countries, as well as the importance of working together with collaborative platforms and the private sector. Finally, we would like to thank CES' commitment towards the provision of platforms to support effective communications on new challenges, as well as to ensure that the flow of information reaches all members, with the aim of facilitating capacity building in all countries and organizations, but especially in those with less developed statistical systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, representatives of Colombia. So before we continue with next, maybe I could check if there are any questions in the chat box. Could some?
Yes, there is one comment. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you. There is a comment from Michael Nagy from UNECE. What was mentioned was climate change, disaster risk management, and environmental policies as the most important ones that can benefit from closer collaboration between the statistical and geospatial community. And he wonders why these important statistical areas are the ones having the least resources available, both on national and international level. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the representative of United Nations Statistical Division.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that many of you will easily believe that I'm perhaps the most excited person in this room now that this joint session is taking place today, because at the UN, I've had the pleasure of being responsible for these two intergovernmental mechanisms, global mechanisms for statistics, of course, a long history of over 70 years. And since 10 years ago with the geospatial information also. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that these are two fantastic professional global communities, and we were talking about values yesterday, they have a lot of shared values, a dedication to service, to quality, and scientific rigor and methods. And but there are also differences that I had to learn. I mean, the geospatial community, for instance, is much closer to the private sector and also much more linked into high-tech IT developments. And I found myself addressing private sector meetings, and I was quite nervous because in my long public service career, I haven't had that experience, and I don't necessarily speak their language. So it was an exciting personal experience for me too. Here in the statistical community, we have often thought of that transition from the National Statistical Office to the National Statistical System. And I would like to encourage all of us to think one step further and think of national information systems. And I think that's what we really need to aim for. And I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about this in the afternoon when we talk about data stewardship. I would like to share one moment where I really was deeply impressed about the integration of geospatial and statistical information. That is when I was in Mexico once, where those two are, of course, institutionally integrated in the same house, which make things a little bit easier. And they made a presentation on the consequences of a hurricane. And they had a series of maps with the path of the hurricane. And then they could analyze, because all of the establishments were geocoded, they could in one slide show what were the economic consequences of the hurricane. I mean, what was the production capability that was affected by a hurricane? And then the next slide showed what were the social consequences, which were the hospitals, what was the social infrastructure, schools, hospitals, etc., because those were all geocoded that were affected, and what were the likely consequences and the policy intervention needs. And then, of course, the last one was the environmental consequences of the hurricane, which was the environmental capital, forests, arable land, and so that had been affected. And I think that was really, for me personally, the moment, and this is quite some time ago, we're talking almost 10 years ago, when I really understood how important it is, I mean, to understand what's happening and to choose the right policy interventions at the right level. And that's also what we are faced with at the global level. I mean, the SDGs are there, but the SDGs, in order to be really effective, they need to be realized at the global, at the regional, continental level, at the national level, at the subnational level, and even at the local level. And in order to bring all of these information levels together statistically, I mean, we need also the geospatial infrastructure underneath. And we know that the policy interests that we have, it's not only the classical ones that we were just talking about, climate change and environment. Those are perhaps the most obvious where we see the link with geospatial. But it's everything else too. The distributional measures, it's not only the national totals that are relevant, it's the distributions. We are talking about that when we're talking about GDP and beyond, and poverty. And so even within a city, which are the crime areas, etc., or which are the poverty stricken areas. And remember that the second mantra of the SDGs is leave no one behind. So there is actually a sort of a mix at the highest level of a global ambition and a focus on the individual enshrined in the policy goal. And COVID was yet another example where we were looking every day. The first thing that everybody saw was on television was maps and numbers. It wasn't only relevant how many COVID cases we had, but where exactly there were. I mean, the distributional element was critically important. And I believe also that our users have already learned to integrate geospatial and statistical information. I mean, the young people today, when they switch on their iPhone, they ask for information that is statistically and geospatially integrated. If you look for a bicycle here that you want to use in Geneva, you press an app and you find how many bicycles are there, where are they exactly, and you can use it. So I believe our users are ready for that. They expect that from us, to get the information packages in that way. I would also like to bring to your attention that I think there is a new phenomenon that I call direct global data. Before, for me as a statistical office of the UN, to provide global data, it was only possible to get national data and add them up, like the global population or the global GDP, etc., etc. But this may no longer be true. If I ask the question, what is the global forest area? I can go down two paths. I can ask all the countries of the world to give me their percentage of their country that is forest area, and I add it up and I have a number. But I can also go to a satellite image and look what is the global forest area on the planet, irrespective of boundaries. So that is for me exciting, but it also makes me a little bit nervous. I want to make sure that if we start going into this direction, I have both global professional communities behind me to help me to make sure that we have the appropriate quality control mechanisms in place. So I'm really making another strong pitch for the joint professional community, as I have been getting on everybody's nerve for the last 10 years doing. And I believe very much in persons. I mean, institutions are important and helpful, but I believe in people. So I would really, if one thing comes out of this meeting, please maintain the contact with your national counterpart. Or if he or she is not here, make that call when you get home. Somebody once said, technical interoperability is quite a challenge, but human interoperability is perhaps even a slightly bigger challenge. But I believe we are perfectly capable to overcome it, in particular, given all the challenges and needs that we have around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you indeed. So I would like to give the floor to Hungary now.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to reflect a bit to what Patrick said about our new challenges and our new strategies, or not new, but our strategic approaches. Of course, our new challenges mean that we need to have updated or new strategies to cope with them. When we talk about coping with these challenges, I think we very often slip to the technical level first, because that sort of means the immediate solution to very complex problems. And of course, the use of secondary data sources is one of these technical level solutions. But here, I think Stefan just mentioned quality frameworks. Here, I think we have to think about new quality control measures and also new quality control quality frameworks to help us identify what the quality pitfalls of our secondary data sources are, and what the quality problems with integrating various secondary data sources can bring. Here among the secondary data sources, we have another agenda item dealing with privately held data, but I think we should very seriously think about privately held data. And here there is some linkage to the geospatial community, because they also rely a lot on privately held data, and they produce privately held data that we can very often use in statistics already, but especially in the future. Of course, surveys are good, but more and more costly, and respondents are more and more reluctant to participate in our surveys. So all the alternative data sources that we can identify will mean that we can survive in the future in producing statistics. But the technical level is important and very challenging, but the strategic level is, of course, much more serious and can bring much more future-oriented solutions if we think about the strategic level. And here we need data strategies, as Patrick also mentioned. We need very serious data management tools and data management approaches. And data stewardship also comes into the picture in this respect. Now, for the cooperation between the geospatial community and the statistical community, I think this the fact that we are sitting here together is already an enormous step forward. There was a lot of interaction already between the two communities, but this is really exceptional that we have this very interesting dialogue. And it is important to see that both we can mutually provide data sources to each other, information and data and knowledge to each other. So this kind of strategic partnership will enable both of us to move forward for the future challenges. I think this is the way to maximize the potential of data, and this is the aim of both communities. So it is very important for both of us to maximize the potential of data and to build these partnerships in the future between the two communities and all the stakeholders of the two communities, because that is also something that we have to think about it. We have different stakeholders sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, representatives from Hungary. The last country which I would like to give the floor, because we must take care also for the time frame, is Canada, please.
Thank you very much for some excellent presentations, and my comments build on those of my colleagues so far. I wanted to just share our experience and kind of try to answer the question that you put on the table, which is what are some practical ways in which we can take what is a really good frame and then move forward. So in that light, I offer a couple of suggestions. The first is, from the last 2 years, what's been the exceptional value proposition of putting these two things together? So the types of things that when we started to bring together statistics and the geospatial framework together that were just seen as revolutionary in a sense was this inequity that we saw, whether it was in the way that vaccines were distributed, whether it was who was impacted first, the front facing, and when you could see that on this geographical frame, it really woke up policymakers to the fact that there's this differentiation, but frankly, it also spurned this demand going forward to look at things in a more systemic way. So it's not just going forward, but it's actually going backwards and seeing why is it that people in low income areas were the most impacted, or they actually took longest to get to the hospital, or there just wasn't enough in terms of per capita. So it asked people to ask the right questions in a sense. So, and I think building on that, I think is one area that has some immediate policy relevance, and I think we should focus in on a few of those. The second is more of a cautionary tale, which is that in some cases when we brought together sources of data, we almost went from a static picture to a movie. And when you bring geospatial data like geolocation and so on, well, people got very nervous about what we were doing, and it was almost a surveillance state. So individually, you could look at these things and say, yeah, they all serve a purpose. But when we brought them together, there's this real heightened fear. And so again, the privacy concerns and what kind of balance in terms of necessity, proportionality, and kinds of ethics frameworks and so on. Again, I think we need to kind of look at that fact from just because we can, should we? And so I think there's a whole set of ethical as well as some real techniques that we need to put in place, and the transparency with which we move forward, and maybe even some of the controls that we put in place to protect that kind of fear that's there. And I think it caught private sector as well as us all by surprise. And so I don't think this is just unique to any one organization. And so I think it is, to pick up on Gabriella's and others' points, I think we have to start to look at the quality controls. We have to start to look at the ethical. We have to look at the privacy frameworks, and know that we're going to have to make them more robust if we're to move forward with these applications. And the last point I'll make is picking up on our conversation before about stewardship. So, if we individually look at stewardship as either geospatial or statistical, well, that's okay. But I think we need to look at this stewardship role together. And there are private sector organizations that are doing this work already and have made a financial, a monetary business out of these things. So in some sense, we have to catch up to them and figure out, how are they operating, and what is the value proposition of stewardship that we bring to that table as well. So I think bringing them into the fold here in terms of how we move forward is another area of focus. Thanks.
Thank you, representatives from Canada. So this was the last intervention from the floor. As I mentioned, because we are running out of schedule, and it's just my role to draw up some conclusions after this discussion. I heard a lot of supportive sentence about collaborative and cooperative activities in front, which is in front of us. The programs and strategic orientations are there, so it's on us, on both community, but not only the statistical and geospatial, but also wider social community to come together, to speak between each other and implement those activities which are in our work program. So from those discussion, I could summarize that we, both communities, so the Conference of European Statisticians and UNGGM Europe, at our plenary session, identify and request from the secretariats to continue the current collaboration in area of our interest, of our mutual strategic importance for the statistical and geospatial and also the wider communities. So this should be somehow included into the preparation of collaboration agreement or extension of existing collaboration agreement beyond to the end of 2022, and organizing next joint plenary session probably in 2024. So I would like to ask you if there is any objection or any additional proposals regarding these draft conclusions. I didn't saw any, so I assume that this conclusion is somehow accepted and put it into the minutes of our session. So now we could move on the next agenda item. This will be moving online in mapping and data and statistics services. So in Conference of European Statisticians agenda, this is item 8B. And I would like to invite Graciela Marquez, the president of INEGI, to chair this session.
Thank you very much. So now we move to agenda item 8B, moving online in mapping data and statistics services. As you all know, there are a few areas in which the COVID-19 pandemic have not imprinted a long-lasting mark. In the last 2 years, geospatial and statistical data communities have witnessed the move towards online mapping data and statistics services. In this session, in this 55-minute session, we'll share experiences of Poland and Denmark. In both cases, we learn from recent integration and statistical and geospatial information. With not further ado, I give the floor to Dominic from Statistics Poland to present new and improved tools for spatial statistics as part of the Spatial Statistic Data Project. Dominic? Will he? Okay, thank you.
Yes, can you hear me? I know. Oh, yes, you can hear me now. So thank you very much. I'll have a short presentation of something that we came up with a few months ago, just basically in April. It's a new and improved tools for spatial statistics. I want to point your attention to this title, new and improved. It's like a quotation from the Oslo manual about the innovations. Innovations are defined with these words exactly, new and improved. That's why we care for that so much, because one of the major cornerstones of our strategy is to innovate or die. That's what we say. So, okay, can I ask for the next slide? So the objectives of the overall project that I'm going to tell you a few words about in the coming minutes was to increase the scope and accessibility of spatially referenced statistical information. We call the whole tool as a geostatistics portal. We already had it since 2013, but the technologies that underlie those systems change rapidly, and in order to be relevant, you need to come up with the new solutions using new technologies, new frameworks. And then that's why we have just started this project. Can I have a next slide? We started already in 2018, and it will last until the end of October this year. It's not that we are not doing anything. Actually, the whole portal has been already launched in April this year, but of course we need a time within the project also to communicate the portal to teach our users to how to use it, and of course come up still with some parts of that are not available yet. The whole project was a little bit extended due to the global pandemic, so it happened to all the projects. I mean, the governmental projects. We had this general regulations that we can, extend the time period needed for realization. Can I ask for the next slide? So, of course, it's very important to say this was sponsored and financed by the European funds. We get, as Poland, as a the country that accessed the European Union in 2004, we get a lot of financial support. This financial support is allocated along something that is called like operational programs, and there's one operational programs aiming at the e-government, and within this program we have been financed the overall cost of the project, as I'm coming up with this number from my memory, it's about 5 million euro, I would say. Yeah, so that's pretty significant amount of money. Can I ask for the next slide? Still, in regard to the cost, I think that the same kind of like output that we have produced, using the money in our country wouldn't be possible in the other countries because the prices level are higher. Anyway, there are some undermining assumptions. We wanted to come up with a much more intuitive graphical interface compared to what we have before, and of course we're looking at the available solutions, and we've tried to be at the top notch of what is available at the moment, because we know that this financing doesn't come every year, so we have to prepare ourselves for the next few years in operations and using this system. It was prepared with all the best practices in terms of user-oriented design. Something that is very innovative, and we're very proud of that, is storing and sharing resources by users. So users can come to our system, not only use our data, but they can also upload their own data and use the system to make visualizations. A few more words about it in a moment. Then, of course, we have added layers that allow for analysis, and the analysis is also including microdata. It doesn't work yet, but we're working on that, so that will be possible also to make the kind of like summary statistics based straight on the microdata that we have in our resources. And then, of course, advanced geostatistical exploration methods. That's something that's on top of that. So next slide, please. So what we had basically in the past was desktop access and mobile access. We're working on the mobile access still, but we added these 3 new components, a heavily rebuilt the previous 2. So we have geostatistical modeling now, exploratory analysis, and semi-automated user content enrichment. Next slide, please. Of course, when you start with the desktop, you just select the data. Basically, this is the the path through the system. You select the data. It can be either your or our data. I mean, from our office or whatever data that we upload to the system. Then you choose the geographical area of interest. Then you choose your visualization method. Then you do your presentation, and you can share it easily on the system as well. Can I ask for the next one? Okay, and there are 3 basic components, at least when you reach out to the system. The first page comes up with those 3 modules, general modules. The first one is about presenting predefined presentations. So our staff can, for example, produce something, just go through those cumbersome steps and produce something that is easily available for those who doesn't want to kind of like invest too much time into learning how the system works. There are predefined analyses that are available right there in the first module. Second module is you can go through the whole cycle and prepare your own visualization with whatever the data you want to have. And then there's the third model that allows you to process your own data. So the second model is about our data. The third one is playing out with your own data. Next slide, please. And yeah, let's start with this first one, this is called resource catalog, and we just come up there with a predefined visualizations. There are not too many of them at the moment because we are still in the project. It's already online, so we're preparing those. So we'll find only 3 now at the moment. But this actually shows you the functionality that's very useful. As I said, it's for someone that want to find the appropriate data quickly and just take a look inside. Let's go to the next slide. Then we have a map portal, and map portal is a very advanced tool that allows you to present our data from statistical office in ways that were not possible even before with the system. So we have a whole range of tools and visualizations methods that can be applied to the data that we have in our resources. So, you can skip through another 4 slides because they will just go to the next slide, please. And so you can have a map like that. Next slide, please. This is another example. Next slide, please. Another example of something very simple but useful. And next slide, please. These are just 5 examples of what you can do, with the data we have at hand. It's very useful. We've heard the stories from our users that have been kind of like even professors in the academia. They choose our system because it's easier for them to do the visualization that if they would have to make it themselves in VR or whatever else. So it's faster. So they very often come to our portal and do it themselves. Next slide, please. And of course, what we plan to also incorporate in the system, which is never easy, it was to kind of like come up with a streamlined way of presenting something that can be called cross-sectional time series. So we present the data both in space and in the time in a very consistent way, and it's also possible within our system. Next slide, please. And of course, grids are, natural ways. We're presenting our, census results at the end of this year according to 1 kilometer grid. So it's nothing new for us, but of course, we have incorporated this as well within the system, and the users can do it with their own data as well. So please, next slide. Mobile access is extremely important. Though I can tell you, that's extremely difficult at the same moment because whatever you come up with, it's complicated. It's complicated considering the amount of screen space that you have on a mobile device, but still we're trying to do our best, and this is going to be available later this year on the mobile devices as well as a separate application. Next slide, please. So these are the screenshots from the applications that's being developed at the moment. Next slide, please. And then we go to the map portal, which allows for visualizations of your own data. As I said before, you can upload your own data. You have like 5 tools. One is about the geocoding. So if your data is not geocoded yet, we offer some services that will automatically geocode your data with a very high accuracy. Of course, you need to play with that because sometimes, you have the errors in your own data. So it's not an easy task, but there's something that can be done. And then there are other 4, tools. Maybe go to the next slide, or I'll go through those tools that are available. So geocoding, I already told you, you have a table of your own data with the addresses, and the addresses are then geocoded using our system, which is, I think, very useful because normally that is a very cumbersome phase of whatever you do if you want to do it yourself by hand. Then the next slide, please. Then we have a resource manager. Of course, this is like a file system, for your own data. You need to have a storage in our system. Of course, you need to log in and register before, but when you do that, you can store your own data and present it, have a list, whatever. It's very useful to do it. The next slide, please. And then you can prepare your own data presentation. So exactly like with the data that we have in our office, you can use your own data to use whatever the tools available or whatever the method that we are providing you with to present your data in a very attractive and a meaningful way. Next slide, please. This is an example of the visualization that has been done. By the way, it's about the crop estimate statistics that we do based on the satellite images in our offices. So we use the data from those estimates to present them within our portal to show how easy it is to be done. So that's very advanced tool, I would say. Okay, then we have a composition studio that you can go layer up, and prepare some kind of your own services when you define the pathway for different tools, and those things that you define along the tools. It's like scripting. You can script the whole process of processing your data and save it as a service. So it's really advanced. It's not that you have to repeat everything by hand. you can just record it to some it's oversimplified, but you can record the whole pathway and then use it to repeat the same task with the other data set, let's say. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we have those exploratory geostatistical data analysis available, not the most advanced, but the core, the basic ones, which allow you to stay within the system without the necessity to go to the external system. So I think it's a huge advantage for the users, because we are offering for free to our citizens something that hasn't been available for them easily. You don't need to install anything. Everything's online. You can play with it, and you can basically prepare all the basic things that it wouldn't be possible to do before. So you go through this kind of like a natural cycle: data processing, data analysis, visualization, and dissemination. Next slide, please. In terms of the methods that we are offering, of course, as I said, the core list, central tendency measures, dispersion, cluster analysis, spatial correlation, taxonomic methods, Helvix, synthetic indicators, something very Polish, but it was, it is internationally named differently. And then Web's typology location quotient as well. Next slide, please. And we have a finally analysis studio, so we can prepare analysis or analytical panel. So we already we were just talking before on my presentation. Somebody has done a kind of like a presentation, an advanced tool for analysis using this system of the vaccinations in Poland. Spatial distribution of those. It's pretty advanced. You can really go deep with those and define whatever kind of like a whole analysis cycle you would dream of doing, without installing, again, anything on your own desktop. You can do them within our system. Next slide, please. Of course, this needs some kind of a specific tools, so this is an example of a data configuration diagram that you can, it's kind of like a visual method. There is a software up there, that does this similarly. We have applied the same concept within our system, so you can kind of like visually, design your processing path. It's very useful, I think. Of course, it looks beautiful on the slides. When you try to do it yourself, you need to take your time to learn all those skills. But it's easier. It's still easier than in whatever other tool. Next slide, please. And of course, in terms of geostatistical modeling, you do the processing, and you select and predictive model, let's say. So this is advanced modeling, model testing and validation is the next phase, visualization and dissemination, sharing, a natural cycle again. Please, next slide. And in terms of models and interpolation methods, we have some predictive modeling, methods like a decision tree model, linear regression model, logistic regression model, spatial regression models, and spatial interpolation methods. So these are all available for the users to be used. Next slide. This is a kind of like a example of the schema of the predictive model that you may define within the system. And again, I want to tell you, this is not a screenshot from any R tool that you can use. This is a screenshot straight from our website, and you can all do that within our system. Next slide, please. So in terms of usefulness as well, you may look for the information within the system that is interesting you. We have some kind of like internal obstacles with making this engine, the search engine, very as useful as we plan at the moment. But we are just using the time to finish the project to actually fine tune those. But this is going to be very, very useful as well. Next slide, please. And just to sum up, oh no, this is, I'm sorry, that's not from this presentation. Because yeah, please, next slide. No, I've sent the wrong file. Oh, so go to the last one. Go to the last one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The previous one. Yeah. Geostat. We encourage you to visit the website. The thing is, I'm copying the presentation template from the last one to the next one, so I didn't delete the slides. But don't worry about it. The last one is accurate. Geostat.gov.pl. We encourage you to visit the website. It's available in English. The translation is sometimes peculiar. Sorry for that. I will try to work on that with my staff. But anyway, it's useful. It works, and it's available for everyone for free. Thank you very much.
Dominic, thank you for sharing such an interesting presentation and sharing the achievements of this very ambitious project. We now welcome Liv Herno from the Agency of Data Supply and Infrastructure from Denmark. He will presenting the Danish Basic Data Program, Data Distributor, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Huh? Can you raise your hand? Oh, he's online. Is he?
Okay, I think I got unmuted now. Well, thank you for giving me the word. Could you please give me the next slide, please? Yes. Just to give you an introduction, the Danish public authorities have since beginning of the 70s registered core information about individuals, that is citizens, businesses, real properties and buildings, addresses, maps, and geography. And we name these information, we name them basic data. When we're speaking about ethics, I heard that before, when we're speaking about ethics, when we're talking about GDPR, data about individuals are of course related to the GDPR data, but in a sense they are the basic data like name, addresses, family relations, but not, for example, health information. We call these basic data, and basic data is used every day throughout the public sector. And it's extremely essential that the basic data have a very, very high quality, because that's a basis for the authorities to perform their tasks properly and efficiently. Not only the authorities, but also the private sector uses basic data in a wide range of areas. Could be in real estate, could be in insurance, could be within the financial and telecom sectors. And I'll come back to that. Please, next slide. Some 10 years ago, the Ministry of Finance with the Agency for Digitization defined the so-called Basic Data Program. And the program aimed at securing, first of all, free, fast, and reliable access to public basic data. Free means without cost. It means that everybody who has a right to access these data could get access to them. But not only the access was the main point, it was also very important to enhance the quality and create a coherent basis for working with these data. So it was a major object that the data were updated once and for all at one place. And then to reach that goal also, to increase the effectiveness, to enhance the quality, to get to a high quality, it was also important to secure standardized data and interfaces. And the goal was not only to be able to use these data within the sectors that I mentioned before, but also to build the basis for innovation, growth, and job creation through new ways of using and combining public authoritative data. So the data were not only distributed for the use of the public sector, but also for private companies and individuals. So if you can build a business on these data, which are not only basic, but they are, so to speak, a part of the Danish society. So everybody should have a right to get to these data, and everybody should have the right to use them, and eventually build a business on the basis of these data. And also, it was the aim to reduce the costs of businesses, of the public administration, through the common use and the sharing of these data. Next slide, please. The program had, and you could extract that from what I previously said, the first pillar was to make basic data freely available for everyone. And the second was to standardize these data so that they could, so to speak, speak with one another. The third pillar was to improve the quality of the basic data and adding new data where needed. And then also to improve the availability of the data through a shared distribution platform or channel. And this platform is the so-called data distributor. Next slide, please. So just to give you an impression of the timeline, it started, as I said, 10 years ago, and it started out with an agreement between the Danish government, the municipalities, and the regions. So all the agencies, so to speak, within the Danish government were involved in the program and supported the project, and supported also the project in the sense that they after it was implemented could take over the use of it and use the basic data. First step was to make basic data freely available. That was done in the same year, 2012. The program as an IT program started up the year after, that is in 2013. And the first step was to develop a basic data model, because you can build any IT system, whatever you might want, if it doesn't have a basic data model, securing that the data can integrate with one another, you won't get very far. In 2014, there was a tender for the data distributor, and the build of the data distributor started in the same year. And well, I won't give you all the years. The important thing is that in 2020, all the different registers were deployed into production. And all the registers, by that I mean data about citizens, data about businesses, addresses, real property, and also the geodata, data which we have. And in 2020, the partners of the program declared it for successfully completed. So we are now looking at 2 years of production. And the next slide, please. And this indicates the usage of the web services from 2020 to 2022. In January 2020, we, or the data distributor, received somewhere around 10 million calls, web service calls in that month. 1 year later, it was around 60 million web service calls per month. And then you can see from December to January, we experienced a steep rise in the use of the data distributor. And the use of the data distributor has risen since then, so that in January 2022, we experienced 1.5 billion web service calls per month. So for every second around that, we receive and we answer 500 calls every second. So you can see a steep rise in the usage of the data distributor. And if we take the next slide, it indicates, I have marked 2 specific services that calls to the geodata which we have. It's called Skærmkortet and it's called GeoDanmark Ortophoto. And if you add the two numbers from January 2022, where we had 1.5 billion calls, you can see that about 1.5 billion of the calls relate to geodata. So it's a very, very important part of distributing these data to a number of different users from very different sectors. Next slide, please. So who uses basic data? I've mentioned the public sector. I've mentioned businesses. I've mentioned private. But here, more or less, are the different sectors that could use it. You could use it for employment. You could use it for emergency response. You could use it for healthcare taxes. You can use it for social benefits. You can use it for construction projects. In fact, the use is more or less limitless. Next slide, please. I have on this slide indicated some of the main users in Denmark. We have eNettet, which represents the financial sector. We have Compet, which represents the municipalities and focuses on public administration. We have the Danish Ministry of Taxation, and then we have ATP as a fourth, which I here wanted to mention, that ATP is a public authority in charge of a number of public services. For example, pension schemes, family and maternity benefits. So just to indicate that the public sector and the semi-private sector, that is ATP, uses this quite a lot. But we have also other users, and the next slide, please. If, for example, you want to find a new home, you can go to the portal bolig.dk. And I took this screenshot yesterday, and it shows the homes that are for sale in Denmark. So they use it. They get the information from the real estate companies which houses are for sale, and then bolig.dk can present it so that you get a real-time overview over what is happening on that market, and you can get the various houses for sale either by indicating a geographical area or by indicating an address where you want to see. And this is, I would say, this is a common Danish hobby in the weekends to look for new homes. So Boliga is one of the main private users of the data distributor. I think they stand for 100 million web service calls every month. So just to give an example, it's not just the public sector using the facilities of the data distributor, the web services, it's also the private companies like this. Next slide, please. And now to the question about the COVID-19 pandemic. You might say that the pandemic as such did not accelerate the move towards online mapping and statistics services, because the basic data program, the data distributor, that was all, the program had been finished, and the data distributor was in production. And you cannot take this rise, which I indicated in the web service calls during the pandemic, that was on the verge between 2020 and 2021. You could not. It did not take place due to the pandemic. It took place because older distribution channels were phased out. But you might say that the infrastructure, together with the data distributor, contributed to curbing the pandemic through supporting the development of public information channels on themes such as, for example, places to get tested or vaccinated. And for example, a public vaccination app was developed within a very, very short period of time, within a month. And what it did was to combine the mapping services of the data distributor with the address information of vaccination places for vaccination, and real-time information about opening hours, queuing times, and so on and so forth. So, and next slide, please. It looked, for example, that's from yesterday too. You can still find these maps. It shows, the website shows that there are, of today, 915 vaccination places in Denmark. And if you take the Copenhagen area, you can find how many places you can get vaccinated within the different areas of Copenhagen. And when you choose that place or that sector of Copenhagen, you get information about, are we talking about vaccination centers? Are we talking about pop-up vaccination places? Are we talking about doctors or pharmacies? And you get the opening hours, and you might, as I said before, even get the queuing time. So important is that we have used in Denmark, we have used the infrastructure, we have used the possibility of distributing through real-time web services. We've used all this information and gathered it, building other portals that could distribute that information in with the purpose, as I said, of curbing the pandemic. And next slide, please. And an even more recent example for what is possible to do is in the case of the present Ukraine war, with the increased heating prices. The Danish government has introduced social help to ease the economic situation of Danish citizens that are using gas for heating, and thus becoming the victims of the steep rise in oil and gas prices. And what the Danish government has done is, instead of making a system of written applications for those who are the victims of the steep rise, the Danish government is handling this in an automatical way. So through the data that are present on the data distributor, they can identify the houses using gas, and they can identify, together with information from taxation Denmark, they can identify the income of those people, and through combining this information about what kind of energy, for what form of energy is being used, with the yearly income of the citizens, they are able to send the money directly to the families that have thus become the victims. So no process of application, no process of reviewing all the applications and selecting the people. It comes automatically, as we have done in other areas of the public administration. So the point is, it is through the basic data, it is through the data distributor possible to find the users of gas heating, gather information about the size of the homes, and in the same process calculate and automatically pay the subsidy they were entitled to. So we have used the existing, we've used in Denmark the existing infrastructure and the existing data that are combined so that they can speak together, so to say. We have used it to act quickly and automatically in these times. Yes, next slide. Which is again this was the end of my presentation. So questions, you either in this way, or you could mail your questions to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank both presenters. And now we move to the general discussion. So if you have questions, comments, please either raise your hand in the platform or take the floor here. No comments, no questions. Then I'll ask some questions. In both cases, I think the projects stress the importance of having user-centered projects. So in this sense, it's not only statistical information, but geospatial information that really allows us to move to user-centered projects like this. The question is here, in the case of Poland, is more on individuals rather than public or private sector users. And in the case of the Danish data distributor, the idea is directly connect with either policy decisions or private decisions. So my question would be whether you have any preference on individual decision making or enterprise decision making. Dominic?
I'm struggling with this microphone always. Thank you very much for this question. It's very important. Indeed, I think the way I presented it, I just concentrated on the experience, user experience from the point of view of the individual. But the truth is, and we have incorporated that within our system, that we will allow other offices, other public agendas as well to store their own data in our system and present it if they wish so. So this functionality is built in, and actually we even thought we were so creative that we thought that we might make it possible also for some kind of like individual users also to kind of like make those predefined analysis and share them with the others. The question here is that we need to allocate some sources in order to curate those so that we not allow for kind of like, that there's not too many, not too much, not too cumbersome, whatever. So there's some curation process needed. And of course you need to have staff to do that. So at the moment we're not starting it. But in terms of the design of the system, it allows for that, and other public offices can also store and present the data within the system. Thank you.
Liv, do you have any further comment? Okay, I have a Belgium here with a question or comment.
Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate both speakers on the way they have been combining geospatial information and statistical information. And I would like to encourage them to go beyond and encourage you all. And especially, I would like you to encourage you to look very closely to see that you can use as much as possible the official geospatial information instead of using, like I saw, OpenStreetMap. So if it's available, please use the official information in your visualization. I know it's not always easy, but it's really important, I think. Thank you.
Yeah.
I could answer this. This is live. The map which I showed was taken directly from the data distributor. So it is an official map.
Thank you.
Okay, Dominic?
Oh, no, it works. So sorry, quick comment. Of course, we're trying to be flexible on both input and output side. So at the input side, you can incorporate whatever layer you want, including the OpenStreetMap as well as the official ones. So they're available for the users. It's up to them to decide, and it's very flexible. Thank you.
Okay. Liv? Otherwise, we'll move to Colombia and then Ireland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe that this is a great opportunity to show how one of the comments and the perspectives that Stefan shared with us, the governance framework between a statistical agency and the geographic and cadastral, for example, authorities in our countries is something very important. As a matter of example, in the case of Colombia, we recently had the opportunity to move towards a real estate observatory, provided that we have the national statistical system integrated with the spatial data infrastructure in Colombia. And we had the opportunity ourselves to be able to integrate the information from real estate pricing agencies, for example, through web scraping or the official registry of transactions of real estate in Colombia, and to put it together with the geospatial information that we have in the geographic and cadastral agency. And this was something very successful in terms that we could respond in a very fast way from a requirement from our private sector, but at the same time, it is an example that we wanted to share with our colleagues here, that the governance frameworks between the statistical system and the geospatial data infrastructure is something very important as matter of effectiveness of getting outputs and providing those outputs in a user-centered perspective, but at the same time to respond which are the demands, for example, from the private sector regarding this information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan Daniel. Now, Ireland, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in respect of both presentations, but most especially on the Danish presentation, given the timeline was intersected by the implementation of the GDPR, to understand, given the very intense spotlight that the GDPR will have brought on the use of personal data, to understand what the dynamic of your interaction with your Domestic Data Protection Commission was, and how the social acceptability of the integration of such potentially intrusive data has landed with the population. Thank you.
Thank you. Liv, ask for the mic.
Yes, I had problems with the unmute button before, but now the important thing is that all the data are official data, and they are meant to be used for the public administration, which means that they come from the registers which are owned by the Danish ministries, and it is then the distribution channel of these data, because it should be possible to administrate in a legal way with these data. And then to the question about the GDPR, we are very aware of the GDPR, and yes, we are in dialogue with Danish authorities dealing with the GDPR, and of course we know that having all these data in one place, it could theoretically be possible from one geospatial point to get to a person and also gather information about the ownership of this person, to, for example, houses and other things. So it is easy, but we have made, and we do that in dialogue with the GDPR authorities. We do that in a way which is restricted. You can only get access to the data which the government registers allow you to get to. I hope that was an answer for you.
Thank you. Now Spain, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gabriela. Basically, Graciela, sorry. I have to acknowledge the both outstanding presentations, both from Poland and Denmark, that somehow illuminated me, because of course the integration of statistical and geospatial information, I think is crucial. We all agree on that. And but I have just a little doubt about how far let me be provocative here. I wonder how far do we want to go in this integration. Of course, nowadays we know that dissemination in statistics is changing very fast, and we all want to show our data each time more granular, more frequent, in a much appealing way, right? And of course, maps are really very useful devices for this. But then, up to some extent, we start using statistical techniques such as interpolation, smoothing, and I'm wondering how far do we want to get in this direction, if we keep in mind that we need to show some transparency in the dissemination of our data. So I'm wondering how far these methodological issues could affect the transparency of the information we are disseminating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if either Dominic or Cliff want to respond, or just we move to the proposed decisions.
So also, if I could ask the interpreters for about 5 minutes more of patience, that we are going to conclude soon. Thank you.
Please, Dominic, as short as you can.
Yeah, just very shortly. I think I share the same concern with Juan. It's easy to present in a set of slides, but then the devil lies in the details. And sometimes you have to be very careful in terms of what you make available for the users, and then you have to be sure as well to let them know what are the risks, or what's the true meaning of the things that they can apply, and what does it mean for the data, and whether it's still official or not, whatever. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of the communication, and really getting the insight to what is being done within the system from the user perspective, so that he deeply understands what is being done. So that's a challenge. But at the same time, there are obvious things that we can offer, like a simple interpolation and with a simple explanation, and still those users can handle that, and it's not difficult. And it's if something is applied, practically every time by everyone, it can be made available by us as well. But there's basically, to sum it up, there is a strong need for a careful curation of what we offer.
Thank you for your response. I think we need to close, and in your screen you'll see the proposed decisions. Are they? Shall I read them? Okay, so the proposed decisions, the joint CES UN GGIM Europe plenary session. One recognizes the importance of developing an online statistical and geospatial products and services to meet emerging user needs and expectations, and requests the secretariats to take this into account in the activities and events of the various subgroups of the UN GGIM Europe and the CES, and to look for further opportunities to collaborate and exchange experiences in this area. So, are there any comments? If not,
we consider the decision.
Adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Graciela. Thank you, and thank you all presenters. Now we are out of time, so just maybe some information from the Secretariat about the housekeeping, and please be back on time at 2:30 when this lunch finished.
Yes, thank you. So we will continue in this room at 2:30. And just to remind for the CES Bureau members that we are going to have now the CES Bureau meeting, which will such a reaction and ovations to our meeting, that the CES Bureau meeting will be in Tempus 1, which is when you turn right, then it's the room number 1 at the end. And the sandwiches will be offered.
2 o'clock.
Sorry?
2 o'clock, the CES meeting. Sorry, 1.
No, 1 at 1 o'clock. So you can still have a few minutes, but then please come to Tempus 1. Thank you and bon appetit.